So this is part two. So this is part two of the Marionetta recap. Sorry it took so long for this part to come out. I was making a lot of edits, and also this one kind of just got pushed aside. Sorry for the wait. Either way, let's get into the next episode. So the next episode opens with Julia being like, "What was that?" And Scene's like, "Oh, that was pretty cool, huh?" And she was like, "No, that was terrifying." And Scene's like, "Whatever. Let's go find Reina." And then we cut to military, and they're like, "Why is everything suddenly get dark?" And it's like one kid starts screaming, and the military people are like, "Hey, what are you doing out here? You should be in the big tent. Come with me." And then that's when we see Reina grabbing this guy and is like, "Hey, I'm your friend." And he's like, "I'm not allowed to talk to people." And she's like, "I'm your friend," and shows him her third eye. Yerk is going up to Amaranth, and she's lighting matches. And Yerk's like, "Why aren't any of them lighting? Are they wet?" And she's like, "No, none of them were." And she's like, "Yerk, we just made a breakthrough with seals." And then Tony comes up with the paperwork and she's like, "We need reinforcements." And Tony overhears about the seals. Then Saheen shows Julia where Reina is, and this dude's like gushing over Saheen's hair and his earrings, and he's like, "You look really cool." And Julia is feeling sick because she feels like an intruder, and this dude, and then Saheen asks for his name, and his name is Jather. So he promises Jather that he'll be able to have hair and earrings too. And then they brief him over the plan. And Saheen asks Julia to go get Tony because there's going to be a few more members in the circus. And by the way, this is what I was talking about when in episode 14, I mentioned this last in part 1, but Saheen says that the circus is worse. That Tony and the circus are worse than the Calgardian government. And also, in that case, why the heck does he want Jather to join the circus if he thinks, and truly thinks, and has said this to Tony's face, that it is worse than the research centers? Why would you do that to someone? Especially someone who is in your same situation. But either way, I'll go more in depth on this after these episodes. So, out. So Bob and Dottie are getting their documents checked, and apparently Tony had not updated it for a while. Then they overhear some military that there's a seal outside, and so the military goes out looking for them when Amaranth steps on someone. And she asks the soldier what he is doing on the floor. The soldier's like, "Oh, I'm just looking for something," and says that he lost the Akons like 20 minutes ago. Tell that to the inquiry and takes him away. And then we cut to Julia running and trying to find Tony. Tony finds her, grabs her by the arm, and is like, "What are you doing out here? I don't have your paperwork." And she's like, "What are you doing out here? I don't have your paperwork." And he's like, "What are you wearing? Are you with Saheen?" And she's like, "No." And she's like, and Tony's like, "Did you help Saheen get us into this mess? This man could lead us to destruction if you let him." And Julia's like, "Enough. I just want answers, and I want you to prove to me that you're a good person." And she says, "I just want to understand." And she grabs him by the arm and takes him away. Trigger warning for blood and violence, more specifically gun violence. So the episode begins with Julia bringing Tony over to the tent, and they're both like, "What's going on here?" And Saheen's like, "Nice to see you finally get off your ass. There's some new people that are going to join the circus." And Tony's like, "Are you kidding me? This is what this is all about?" And Saheen's like, "Yes, saving people." And Tony's like, "No, these people are all a burden. It's a burden on me. It's a burden on us. If you don't think it's a burden, then you kill them yourself." And Saheen's like, "Don't you think I would have done it if I knew how?" And then Tony's like, "Then who did it?" And he looks at Reina, and Julia, and they don't know. And then Sahin's like, oh, he's tired of you, isn't he? He's sick of you too, Anthon. And Tony's like, what do you want me to do? Well, I'm trying to keep everyone truly not dead, while I'm fighting to keep everyone together. And Sahin's like, you gave up a long time ago. You promised me you'd be a good leader. I'm begging you. And then so Raina looks outside and is like, I'm not sure if Sahin's plan is good. And then Julia puts her 2 cents into it and is like, hey, dumb question, but why don't you just keep them alive and have them join the circus? And then Tony's like, no, it's not silly, but we can't have anyone alive because then there's nothing for them to lose if they snitch. And then the icons are like, oh, we promise we won't snitch. And Raina takes Sahin and is like, hey, come with me quickly. And Jather is like, we promise we won't snitch. We hate the government just as much as you do. And then bang. And Julia and Tony are stunned. And the crazy lady is like, what do we have here? Then Julia's heart's racing as she's looking at Jather. And crazy lady is like, oh, what do we have here? People who are some accomplices. And Sahin's like, I want to go help them. And Raina's like, no, don't do it. Crazy lady's like, oh, look what we got here. And that's when Dottie and Bob come in clutch. And Dottie's like, oh my gosh, I thought I'd never see you again after those mean Icons kidnapped you. And she thanks Yerk and Crazy Lady, and they're like, no problem. And everyone's just like, yeah, thank you very much. And everything's going as planned until Julia is like, you broke the law. There was no trial or nothing. And then everyone goes, oh crap. All right. And then Crazy Lady comes up and is like, what's your name? And she's like, Julia Lazarus. And she's like, well, I'm Colonel and I can do whatever the fuck I want. And she leaves and is like, come on, Yerk, we have things to do. And Dottie is like, that could have been a lot worse. And Sahin's like, oh, really? That's how much you care about us Acons, huh? And Dottie's like, make no mistake, I don't discriminate between Acons and Calgonians, but all I see is people inside the circus and out. And frankly, I am tired of both of you. And Dottie's like, so if I have to sell out outsiders, I'll do it. And Sahin gets really mad about this. And they just killed a man right under your nose. And Dottie's like, yes, while you were hiding. And Bob's like, I'm pretty sure he was still breathing. And Raina's like, that's worse. And then Sahin gets really mad at Tony, being like, it's all your fault. You should have made them sign the contract, you coward. And then Tony's like, oh, really? It's all my fault. Okay. And tells everyone to pack up. And Sahin's crying in the corner, being like, he doesn't told you he wouldn't care. So Sahin's plan was really dumb. So I'm going to give you my take on it, what I would have done differently. For the most part, Sahin's plan was not that bad, all right? If we're just looking at it from his perspective. So this is everyone in the circus, all right? So we don't care about those people. Our only goal is to get the Acons out of prison and into the circus. Okay? Now, if we're going to do that, I think what Sahin did at first was pretty smart, okay? To break the seals, I'm just going to make a little doop doop. This is a seal under the bridge, all right? So you're going to break that seal, all right? All right, that seal's broken. That way the military comes over. All right, the military comes over with the Acons to fix the seal. And then Raina can, swoop in. And, help one of the other Acons. And, get one of the other Acons to get over there. Alright. Sorry. All right, and then that icon gets a little bling. All right, we bedazzle the icon. All right, also known as Jather. All right, we bedazzle Jather. All right, we give him jewelry, and he gives it to all his other little icon friends. All right, so now they're all blinged out. Okay, and then then they all go to a tent in the circus. And here's where the plan diverges. Okay, so what Sahin did was tell Julia. All right, this is Julia right here. All right, he told Julia. This is Sahin. All right. This is freak. All right. My bad for my really bad drawings right now. All right. So he went and told Julia, "Hey, go get Tony." This is Tony right here. All right. Go get Tony. And honestly, I think that's pretty freaking stupid. Because as we saw, Tony ain't going to make them sign the contract. Tony isn't going to make them sign the contract, okay? And this is a good thing, because I'm going to tell you all the other things that could have happened with Sahin's plan, all right? Instead, what we're going to do is we are going... Stop. Okay. Raina. Okay. Raina. Okay. Sahin. Doom. Okay. And Julia, for this example. I don't think I'd actually have Julia involved at this point, but just so she's here. All right, we are all going to take the icons and we are going to smuggle them into the circus, okay? I'm going to find a little place for them to hide. So we're all going to take the icons to the circus and... All right, and wait until... And we're going to wait for the circus to start moving. All right, we're going to wait until we're all packed up and the circus has already started moving. And, you know, we're on our way. Okay? And that way, if Tony ever finds out, okay? It's Tony. That way, if Tony ever finds out about the icons that aren't Sahin and Raina, we could convince him, we can convince him, one moment, I really positioned these icons in a really bad way. Okay, let's move them over here. All right, we can convince him. I gotta learn how to draw a straight line. Okay, we can convince him, probably with Julia most likely, but anyone can really do this, that the icon should stay for a little bit until their hair grows out and then they can go wandering about, okay? And then Tony's gonna be like, fuck. And he's gonna be like, fine. And they get to stay. Yay! For the time being. Boo. Alright, but that way the icons can leave free from the circus and they have nothing to lose, as we established, because if they snitch the government, they go back to the research centers. Okay, so now they are free to roam the world. This is an oval. Roam the world. Okay, of all of Calgonia, that is the moon. We're gonna pretend that's the world. They're going to the moon. Okay, either way, they go free and they are no longer behind bars. And then boom, boom, boom. That is how we successfully free the Akons. You notice how Tony was only in the plan at the very end. And even then, we would have already been on the move, so they would have been like, fuck it. We might as well keep him there. Alright, here's what would happen if Tony would have signed them into the circus, okay? So, Tony's here. Alright, so they get signed into the circus. All these Akons, they die, okay? But then they're back to life. Yay! Alright. They are free, quote unquote. Alright, they're free. Sorry for my atrocious handwriting. But then, just like Sahin, they're gonna be like, why did we come here? This place is still a prison, and they are most likely going to get mad at, most likely going to get mad at Sahin. Okay. They're gonna get mad at Sahin. One moment, let me draw Sahin. Alright, boom, boom, boom. Okay, they're gonna get mad at Sahin or Tony. Either one. Either way, the circle will repeat itself. All these Akons are gonna... And now there are even more Akons. One moment, I forgot unnamed Akons. They don't have bodies. Alright. And now all these Akons are... you got like 10 Akons, and they're all mad at these two people for tricking them to sign the contract. Heck, they may even be mad at Julia and... One moment, I gotta make her hair longer. Julia and Reina. Okay? You gotta think about that. So, they are mad at all of these people for their own actions. Alright? Their own choice to sign the contract, which, understandable, but still, Sahin put himself in the same place as Tony. So, that is what if they sign the contract. Bad situation 1, and then this is if they sign the contract, bad situation 2. Okay, so they sign the contract, scribble, scribble, scribble. Boom. All right, scribble, scribble, scribble. All right, and then crazy bitch comes in. She's this. Scribble, scribble. Okay, crazy bitch comes and goes bang bang, shoots him in the back. One moment, boom, bang bang, shoots him in the back, alright? And he's already, they're already dead, so then they come back to life and is like, what? Alright? And then crazy lady's gonna be like, oh, there's magic being used here. Then they're gonna be like, lock everyone up, alright? And now they're in this really bad situation, and the only way out is, permanent execution, which I'm pretty sure they're not going to have access to, and they're just going to end up being extremely tortured. Either way, that's bad situation number 2. No matter how you slice it, them signing the contract is a bad idea. This, what actually happened in the story, was one of the good endings compared to the other two, because we have sign the contract, get caught, and we have sign the contract, everyone hates them. And then we have my plan, where everyone escapes, where all the Akons are free, and maybe Julia Saheen and Reina get scolded a little bit. You know, who cares? That is my analysis of this whole plan. I hope you enjoyed my doodles. They look like yes. So tell me what you would have done if you were in Saheen's place. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed. Bye. So Tony is walking up to his room when he sees Mr. Finnegan waiting in there. And then we cut to Julia, and she's like, hey, I'm going to convince Tony to not leave yet and to stay. Then Julia is running over to Tony's room, and Mr. Finnegan's like, hey, the military left, so I figured I'd stay here. And Tony's like, hey, I had a pretty hard day. You sure you don't want to think about this? We're packing up right now. And Mr. Finnegan's like, well, then there's nothing for me to think about. And tells Tony that him joining the circus was a mistake. Meanwhile, Julia comes to the door and is hearing all this and is like, what? Free? Mr. Finnegan's gonna be like, free? Is it really possible after all? And Mr. Finnegan's like, I just want to see her. And Tony's like, hey, after I do this, there's no going back. And Mr. Finnegan's like, I don't care. And Tony's like, please close your eyes, and it won't hurt a bit. And Mr. Finnegan asks Tony if he'll be able to see Hannah again. And Tony is like, yeah. And Julia's like, wait, reunite. And Mr. Finnegan's like, finally. And he gets his throat slit. He enters the spirit realm, and this time he's at peace. And he sees Hannah, and he's at his younger self again. When all of a sudden he starts getting tied up by this weird string, and he can't move. And then we follow his spirit string to the monster where it disintegrates. And Julia is in a complete panic. So Julia is like, oh my gosh, and she hears Tony walking towards her, and she runs off, and she's like, he's locking the door, and he has a box in his hand, and she's wondering if that's where he keeps the dagger. Either way, so Julia follows him and is like, where is he going? Should I follow him? That's pretty dangerous. Saheen was right. He's a puppet master. Even though Mr. Finnegan asked to get killed, he was still in a very bad state, and Tony did it with no questions. So Tony comes back and doesn't catch Julia. Meanwhile, she goes to the door that he went into and was like, hey, this is a strange, messy room. And then a wall behind her starts to glow orange, and it just breaks open. So Julia sees a bunch of stairs and goes up the stairs and sees the monster in the attic and reaches out her hand, and then the monster grabs her, and she ends up grabbing the box. And she realizes that the monster in the attic is what signed her contract, is what made her sign her contract. Okay, so Julia is running back down, and she's like, something's really wrong with the monster in the attic. I can't stay there any longer. And so she goes to her room, and her brain is tired, and she doesn't know what's going on. Then she goes to Camille, because she's like, wait a minute, Camille, what about her? Is she okay? Is she asleep? And Camille's perfectly fine, and then Julia was being really mad, so plop hits her with a ball. So she's having trouble going to sleep because of what happened to Jather and her not being able to confront Tony. And she doesn't know who to trust. When she thinks of her dad and begins writing a letter to him, she decides that she doesn't want to worry her father and destroys it. Cut to Reina trying to comfort Saheen, and him saying that he's fine, he just needs to do a little more research. Trigger warning for blood and violence. And self-harm. So if you're sensitive to any of that stuff, I will have timestamps on when they're about to happen. That way you can just skip. So yeah. I hope you enjoy the rest of this video. So next day, Camille wakes up and is like, wow, what a fantastic day, and goes to Saheen and Reina's place and asks to blindfold Reina. So then Reina gets blindfolded and goes with Camille and sees this beautiful waterfall and is like, this is what I needed. And then Camille and Raina go swimming. So then Tony gives an announcement saying that there's going to be a new route because a circus member put everyone in danger, and that he is sad to say that Mr. Finnegan decided to leave the circus. And then Tony gets sucker punched by Guitar Man, and Guitar Man's like, you killed him, you secretly murdered him. And Tony's like, he asked me to, and I'm the only one who can dispatch of people. And he's like, what do you want me to do? Put his life up for trial? And Guitar Man's like, no, I wanted to say goodbye. Then Guitar Man calls Tony a monster, and Julia's like, what? It's not just Sahin that thinks that stuff? And then Tony goes up to Julia afterwards and is like, hey, you wanna throw knives at me? And Julia's like, okay. And then while Tony is brainstorming poses, he says to Julia, like, hey, now that we're alone, there's something I want to talk to you about. And then Julia drops the knife and runs away to Sahin's place. So she's questioning why she ended up here, and she just needs someone to talk to when she runs into Raina. And Raina says, like, oh, I'm going on a picnic with Camille, and Julia lashes out at her, being like, Camille's gonna abandon you like she did me, and she's only getting close to you, so she's only friends with you because she's trying to get close to Sahin because she's in love with him, and leaves Raina heartbroken. Either way, she comes into Sahin's room and sees that he stabbed himself in the chest and pulls the knife out and asks him why he did that. And Sahin explains that he's looking for the pain seal, and that he's trying to get it to show up, because in order for a seal to show up, you have to create the element that's involved with it, hence him stabbing himself. And he explains that in order to use a seal, you have to borrow the energy from somewhere else, hence why Aspen went dark when he used the fire seal. And Julia asks if Sahin trusts her, and Sahin's like, I guess I do. And Julia's like, hey, then where's the seal that keeps us all alive? And Sahin's like, oh, clever girl, you're thinking of the big questions now. And he's like, I don't know, but if I can draw that, I can go off scot-free. But Tony's not going to give that up. And then Julia's like, yeah, by the way, I'm ready to kill Tony. I have his dagger. And Julia's like, after everything that happened with Jasper, I went to go convince Tony to stay, and I saw him dispatch of Mr. Finnegan. And she says that she saw Tony with a box that had a dagger in it, and he put it, it went to this room, and she followed him, and she went up the stairs and saw a monster in the attic, and Sahin's like, oh, you saw God. And then Julia's like, no, that's superstition, what are you doing? And Sahin's like, well, that's the only way to describe it, and this is your destiny, you have to kill Tony. And Julia's like, why do I have to kill him? Why? And she's like, I'll do it, I'll kill him. And we cut to Camille at the waterfall by herself. We cut to the military, and the soldiers are gossiping, being like, oh, she hasn't found a new discovery since she got put in here. And military lady's like, I had enough of this shit. I could send them all to the inquiry, but my father wouldn't like it much. And she's like, we need something to help us with the war, Yerk. What did the Akons tell us? And Yerk's like, oh, they said that there was 2 Akons in the circus, and we haven't been able to get anything out of Jather. Military lady's like, okay, we're going to the circus, Yerk. And we see Amaranth's last name, which is Steinheimer. The next episode, we cut to Camille, and she's adopting all the puppies, and she sees Raina, and she storms off, and is like, hey, you didn't come to the waterfall yesterday, did I make you mad, are you okay? And then Raina's like, get off of me, I know why you're trying to be friends with me, I know about your little crush. And she's like, don't touch me, you're only getting close to me because of Sahin. And Camille's like, the only person I told about my crush was Julia. And so she confronts Julia and demands an apology, being like, hey, did you tell Raina that I had a crush on Saheen? And Julia's like, yeah, because it's true. I figured I'd give her a heads up before you abandoned her too. And then Camille's like, abandon you? I made friends. And Julia's like, who else am I supposed to spend time with? Everyone else here is weird. And Camille's like, it's not the circus, it's you. You were the same at work. And Julia's like, yeah, because those people weren't my friends either. You were, or at least I thought you were. And then Julia blurts out, you forgot my birthday. And then Camille's like, I threw you a whole birthday party. And then Julia's like, yeah, where you left me alone with all those creeps. And then Julia's like, maybe we shouldn't be friends anymore. And says to Camille to go away. And Camille's like, okay, but just so you know, I'm not in love with Saheen. I'm in love with Raina. And Julia's like, wait, a girl and a girl getting married? That's weird. And then it opens the floodgates to all those forbidden thoughts that Julia has been keeping down. So Julia's like, okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna kill Tony. And then we get a flashback to Saheen being like, you sure you don't want me to do it? And then Julia's like, yeah, I'm sure. I'm pretty sure I have to do it. And she's like, I have to do it to escape. And we're just getting these images of, she's like, I have to do it. Our first show, I'm going to kill Tony and this nightmare will all be over. And then we cut to Camille as she goes into Raina's tent. And she's like, hey, Raina, there's something I need to tell you. And says to Raina, I love you. And she explains that she followed Dottie and that she followed her and saw the incident with Dottie. And she thought that she was so lucky to even see Raina. And the whole reason why she joined the circus was because she wanted to be with Raina. And Raina calls her stupid and is like, so you come in here into my tent to tell me that it's my fault that you made this dumb decision, and like says you're going to hate me in the future because of what you did to yourself, and tells Camille to leave. Then we cut to Crazy Lady and Yerk, and they just arrived at the circus. Meanwhile, Tony is getting ready for the show, and Julia walks in, and she's like, oh, is this your true form, Tony? And explains that Camille made costumes for them. Like, I have to do it. Camille made costumes. And explains do it. And Raina calls her stupid and is like, so you come in here into my tent to tell me that it's my fault that you made this dumb decision, and like says you're going to hate me in the future because of what you did to yourself, and tells Camille to leave. Then we cut to Crazy Lady and Yerk, and they just arrived at the circus. Meanwhile, Tony is getting ready for the show, and Julia walks in, and she's like, oh, is this your true form, Tony? And he's like, no, and explains that Camille made costumes for them, and is like, hey, Camille made a costume for you too. Go in the back. Dottie will do your makeup. Real quick, trigger warning for blood and violence. Either way, back to the story. So Dottie just finished doing Julia's makeup, and then Julia gets swept into the back by Saheen, and Saheen's like, oh, that's a really nice costume of yours. And, and he's like, did you change your mind? Killing someone isn't easy, Julia. And Julia's like, are you hesitating? And Saheen's like, no, I'm not. It's just, I can't believe this is actually happening. And Julia makes him promise that Tony is actually an evil person and this is the right thing to do. And that he's not just using her. And Saheen's like, yeah, which is really reassuring. Either way, Saheen's like, are you sure you want to kill Tony? I can do it, because killing someone will haunt you for the rest of your life. And then Julia's like, yeah, I'm sure. And once I kill him, we're gonna go back home, but before that, we're gonna go save Jather. It's almost Julia's turn, and her heart is racing, and Tony's like, hey, are you nervous? I always get nervous before a show. I wish I could give you some good advice, but just go out, just do your best, okay? And then she sees Camille, and she's looking heartbroken, and Camille's like, hey, it's the mushroom guy. And Julia's like, yeah, I love my costume. And then it's time. And Julia's like, this is the right thing to do. I'm doing it for our parents. I'm doing it for Mr. Finnegan and Jather. And as she picks up the dagger, she gets ready to throw it. She throws it straight in Tony's face. The crowd's shocked and disgusted, and the members of the circus are like, oh man, another one place we can't go. Meanwhile, Dottie's like, I recognize that knife. So we're back where we were before. A knife in an eye, blood dripping, and Camille wondering what just happened. Camille's like, it's fine, don't worry, Julia, as she's crying, and Julia breaks down and is like, no, he's dead. Then Tony gets up, and Julia begins to panic because the dagger didn't work. And Tony is alive. The crowd starts to panic even more due to a dead guy walking, and the rest of the circus is like, oh, we're screwed. And everyone is losing their mind. Meanwhile, Crazy Lady's like, this is very interesting. And Julia's like, I screwed up, but I've got an idea. And she introduces everyone to Anthon Granger's horror show. And everyone is good with it. And all of a sudden, everyone in the back comes out and starts doing a bunch of wacky, scary things. And it turns out to be a hit. But Tony isn't very amused because he got stabbed in the eye. Meanwhile, Sahin snatches up Julia, and Military Lady notices that, and overhears his name, Sahin, and sees that he's an Akon, and is like, oh, very familiar. Either way, Sahin and Julia are looking for a place to hide, and Sahin's like, hey, take me to the monster in the attic, and Julia's like, okay, fine. All right, so they go to the room, and they are almost to the stairs, and it's open, and as Sahin starts to walk in, the door starts to close. And they're like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? How do we open it again? And that's when they realize that they've been caught. And Tony is like hiding like a coward. I'm disappointed. And is like, hey, lock him up. And Sahin's like, you've disciplined me enough. Like, you're not gonna break me. And tells Julia not to tell him shit. And and Dottie's like, oh, I guess, planning a murder can be really romantic. Tony is holding a knife and is like, hey, where'd you get this? Sahin give it to you, and Julia is panicking. And Tony and Dottie are like, oh, Tony's like, oh, are you a spy? And Dottie's like, oh, her dad's military. She probably is. And Julia is begging the monster in the attic for help because she did what she was told. And that's when Camille jumps in front of her. Is like, hey, Julia probably had a reason to do that. And Tony's like, I don't have the energy for that shit. And they get locked up in Dottie and Bob's room. And Julia's having a panic attack, and Camille comforts her and is like, hey, I'll be okay. And Julia explains her contract and how she has to kill Tony or else she dies in a year. And Camille's like, oh, I understand. I promise I'll do my best to help you. And she makes Julia promise that she's going to make friends in the circus. And then Tony comes into the room and is like, it's time. Boop. Cut to Crazy Lady and Yerk, and Crazy Lady's like, wow, that was a really good show. And Yerk's like, yeah, that show's kind of weird. And Crazy Lady's like, there hasn't been many Akons that have escaped the research center, but one of them a long time ago was named Sahin, and he was known as the boy who disappeared. Thank you for watching this far into the video. It was really fun to make, and before you leave, there's just a couple of things that I want to go through before I officially end this video. So my final thoughts after reading this comic like 2.5 times, three and a half, I'm not really sure. After reading it that many times, the comic gets better, and I'm going to give you an example right here. Mr. Finnegan's story, the first time I read it, I was like, okay, it's sad, but I'm not really feeling the kick. The second time, it was more powerful, and then the third time, I don't know how to explain, but I truly felt those emotions, and I usually do not feel emotions while I'm reading or watching a show, but this comic is able to make me feel things for fictional characters. Like in the episodes where Sahin's trying to free the Akons, I was so mad. Not because Tony wouldn't assign them into the circus. I was mad because Sahin's plan was so stupid, and all those Akons could have made it if it wasn't for Sahin's stupidity. I remember the first time I read that, and you can watch the video. The first time I read that, I remember being so mad that I had to walk around the house. All right, and I know that I was really mad when I read that episode, and I've never gotten that mad while watching a show or reading a book or nothing. Okay, the last couple of episodes, my anxiety was all the way up, and even this time, I was dreading the moment where Julia was going to stab Tony, because even knowing what's going to happen, it just made it even worse. And that's the thing I love about Marionetta, is it just gets better every time you think back to it. Even the side characters, even the characters that don't even matter are fantastic. Like that high-ass puppy and guitar man. Honestly, I did not notice how much they were in the actual comic until I went back and read it. But honestly, I have never gotten so attached to side characters before. I can go on all day about how much I love Marionetta, but I want to get to the ships for it now. Just so you know, I am a Toad Julie shipper and a Cam Julie shipper, or as I like to call it, a Clown Tract and Cam Julie, because I can't think of another name for them. Either way, I'm pretty sure Clown Tract is dead, unless Tony is into that shit like Julia is. And I'm gonna be mad at Tony, I'm gonna be mad at the character, being like, bro, you deserve so much better. But at the end of the day, I'm gonna be glad my ship's not dead. Cam Julie is probably never gonna happen, but I do think it is a better ship than Sahin and Julia. But ships don't matter, because at the end of the day, what I'm here for is the theories. And a couple of days ago, I found on Webtoon can post images and, things like how you would on Tumblr or Twitter. And I already posted this on Tumblr, but I want to share it to my general audience. And that is this image that was posted on Merriam-Webster's thing a couple days after Marionetta finished its first season. So we're going to dissect it, and then I'm going to give you the two endings that I think could come out of that, or just could happen in general. So yeah. First off, we see that manipulation is still going to be a big thing in the second season. We see that Sahin, Tony, along with Camille, a mysterious new person, and Dottie all have a marionette control in their hand, but what I really want to pay attention to is their facial expressions. Tony looks concerned, Sahin looks like he knows what he's doing, Dottie looks like she's enjoying the game, and Camille looks like she is unknowingly doing it. And we also have to draw attention to the fact that Mr. Finnegan, Bob, Raina, and the monster in the attic are all in the image, but none of them are holding a controller. Bob also looks concerned, but he's not holding one of the marionette controllers. But the big question is, who is the man with the blue shirt and white cuffs? Because we've never met anyone with that before. I have two theories, and one of them being that is the original owner of the circus, or more accurately, as we're going to know him, the monster in the attic. Or it could be Steinheimer, but I think that the monster in the attic is probably more accurate. We're not going to see him like that in present time, but we are going to see memories of him, probably from Tony's perspective. Because here's my theory. I think that Tony was in a very similar situation as Julia is in now. Only difference was that he was successful. And what happened was, after he got rid of the original owner of the castle at that point, he became the owner and runner of the castle, and the original owner became the monster in the attic. And that Tony and Sahin, and most likely Dottie and Bob, all know this. Hence why Sahin is like, oh, I know about the monster in the attic. I know about your little secret, Tony. Because he knows about who the monster in the attic is. And we have to pay attention that Julia was like, the big question is, who is the monster in the attic? That's what I'm thinking it is. And another thing, and I know I'm bouncing around everywhere, but the monster in the attic is a very big part of the story, and I can tell. But he is the reason why, what happened to Mr. Finnegan, this is what I'm thinking. When Tony cuts the string, what happens is that the person's spirit gets absorbed into the monster, and that's where the energy is coming from to keep everyone else alive. Without those people who are like, I don't want to be a part of the circus anymore, there would not be enough energy to keep everyone else alive. Because as we heard from Sahin, a seal needs to borrow its power from somewhere else. So I think that Tony is not only concerned with the fact that Julia is trying to kill him, but with the fact that Tony knows he will become the monster in the attic, and Julia will have to take care of all the burden of being the ringmaster. And I think that perfectly falls into what I think is a possible ending, and this is honestly one of my favorite idea for an ending. But either way, Julia is successful in killing Tony, and so we get a time jump to like blank years later, and Julia is the ringmaster of the circus, and Tony's the monster in the attic at this point, when all of a sudden a mysterious new member joins the circus without signing a contract with Julia. Personally, I really like that ending, and I think it would be really interesting to see that ending. But an ending that I think is more likely to happen is that Julia kills the monster in the attic, and then everyone's spirit gets let go. It gets released into the afterlife. I think that's a more likely ending. I don't think that it's going to end with Julia getting what she wants. I think that I don't think that Julia is going to be able to truly escape the circus alive. But yeah, that's just my thoughts. And I hope you enjoyed the video. So tell me some of your theories. What did you think of my theories? What do you ship? Do you like this comic? Did you not know about this comic until now, and now you're going to check it out? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Bye!